Rain slicked the late-night streets of Manhattan, turning every traffic light into a smeared neon reflection on the asphalt. Benjamin Hard moved through the drizzle with the quiet precision of a man who never hurried and never needed to. At 45, he carried his height, an even 6'3", and his tailored dark coat like a subtle challenge to the city itself. The umbrella he carried was closed, the rain barely touched him. The elevator to his loft hummed softly, carrying him upward to the top floor of a glass-walled building that overlooked the Hudson. Inside, the air smelled of oolong tea and polished wood. Books and vinyl records lined the shelves, their order precise but not fussy. A black Steinway Grand waited near the windows like a silent companion. Benjamin noticed the envelope before he turned on the lights. It lay on the small console by the door, ivory paper sealed with a smear of deep green wax. No postage. No name. Only a faint scent of bergamot, unexpectedly elegant, and unmistakably deliberate. He slid it open with the silver letter knife he kept for such things. A single chess piece slid into his palm, a black knight, carved from ebony, cool and heavy as stone. A square of thick card accompanied it, bearing just 4 words in clean serif type. Checkmate at 11. No signature. No address. Only the time. Benjamin's pulse did not quicken, but his mind sharpened. A black knight. He had seen one before, in photographs that had flooded every New York news outlet 5 years earlier, when the city had obsessed over a mystery that refused to die. The Silent Quartet. Even people who didn't care for classical music had known her name, Emma Caldwell, 27, a prodigy whose touch on the piano could make a crowded hall hold its breath. She had vanished after her final concert at the crumbling Quartet Hall, leaving behind an unfinished Chopin nocturne on the music stand, a half-empty cup of green tea on the windowsill, and a lone black knight resting on the Steinway's fallboard. No body. No ransom. No answers. Benjamin had never worked the case, it belonged to the NYPD and, briefly, the FBI. But he remembered every photograph, every hesitant news anchor recounting theories. The chess piece had haunted him most. A move without a board. A signal without a code. Now, 5 years later, the same piece rested in his hand. He set the card on the counter, studying the letters for pressure, angle, a tremor of personality. The printing was flawless, mechanical, an invitation that revealed nothing and everything at once. Whoever sent it knew him well enough to leave no handwriting, yet bold enough to walk past the building's security to place it inside his locked apartment. Benjamin brewed tea. Sencha leaves swirled in steaming water, their grassy scent grounding him. He let the silence stretch while he traced possibilities, a provocation, a trap, a challenge. 11 o'clock. Tonight? Tomorrow? No date given. Only the hour. He carried the black knight to the piano and set it beside a yellowed clipping from the New York Times that still lived beneath the glass top of his desk. The headline, "Pianist Disappears After Final Encore," stared up at him. The photograph caught Emma mid-bow, a smile both radiant and remote. Behind her, the old concert hall loomed like a dark cathedral. The rain intensified against the windows, a soft percussion. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. Someone wanted him to remember Emma Caldwell. Someone believed the game that began 5 years ago had never ended. At 11, the city would give him an answer. The taxi rolled quietly to a side street near the old district of Midtown, where the neon glow of corporate signage faded into brick-and-mortar anonymity. Benjamin observed the city's pulse through rain-streaked glass, shuttered cafes, flickering street lamps, and puddles reflecting the fractured skyline. He paid no heed to the driver's idle chatter, nor to the random hum of late-night traffic. His focus was singular, tonight's invitation. The building stood almost invisible among others, its blackened stone facade unremarkable, save for a brass plaque near the door engraved simply, "Royal Gambit Club." No lights spilled from its windows, only the faintest shimmer of polished wood inside. Benjamin stepped out and adjusted his coat collar. He carried nothing beyond his presence, yet the city seemed to acknowledge him, as if it remembered every case he had touched, every puzzle he had solved. Inside, the club exuded an elegance that felt lived in, not staged. Dark mahogany walls absorbed sound, while dim amber sconces traced gentle arcs across the floor. A single spiral staircase led to a mezzanine balcony overlooking a main hall where a chessboard the size of a table dominated the room. Two men in tailored suits lingered in corners, silent as statues, observing arrivals with polite scrutiny. Benjamin's eyes scanned the space and stopped. Richard Gray. The man was waiting near the board, tall, angular, impeccably dressed in charcoal and white. His hair, slicked back, glimmered under the soft light. At 47, Gray carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to untouchable power. But Benjamin had learned to read people, to see the imperceptible tremor beneath a well-maintained mask. He noted the micro-expressions, a tightening around the eyes, a faint twitch at the jawline. Curiosity. Recognition. Appraisal. Gray's lips curved slightly, a half-smile devoid of warmth. "Mr. Hard," he said, voice smooth as varnished wood. "You made it." Benjamin inclined his head, voice neutral. "I received your message." "The hour is close," Gray said, gesturing to the chessboard. The pieces gleamed under the single hanging lamp, black and white carved to perfection. "I trust you recognize the board. Some pieces, I imagine, are familiar from the news." Benjamin's gaze fell on the black knight at the center, identical to the one in his loft. A pulse of memory flickered, the Silent Quartet, the vanished pianist, the media frenzy, the unsolved mystery. "Familiar enough," he said quietly. "Though the context changes." Gray's eyes glinted. "Indeed. Tonight, the game is personal and public. Every move you make will test not only your skill but your understanding of the past." Benjamin surveyed the board. Each piece was positioned deliberately, pawns lined the front, knights in standard formation, bishops slightly off-center. But it was the Black Knight, the same piece, carved from ebony, that seemed to radiate significance, as if the game itself whispered secrets only he could hear. Gray gestured to a chair across the table. "Sit. We play until 11. Benjamin complied, fingers brushing the cool wood. He noted the subtle arrangements around the room, a window ajar on the mezzanine, a faint echo of Chopin from hidden speakers, a discarded cup with a green tint at the edge of the bar. Small, precise details that told a story for anyone willing to observe. "You know why I chose this hour," Gray continued. "The media loves anniversaries, and the city remembers. The Silent Quartet was more than a headline. It was a move in a larger game, and tonight, we continue it." Benjamin's expression remained unreadable. His mind, however, was already cataloging, analyzing, calculating. He had never met Gray outside of professional rumor, yet the man's presence carried history, old money, old influence, old secrets intertwined with a missing young woman and a city that refused to let her story fade. The clock above the mantel ticked quietly, each second punctuating the tension. Benjamin's hand hovered over the first pawn. In that gesture alone, he recognized the duality of the moment, a game on the board, and a game in the shadows of five-year-old mysteries. He would move carefully. He always did. And he would remember, in this city, every piece has its place, every move has its consequences, and even the smallest oversight could turn the game from victory to ruin. Gray leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Shall we begin?" Benjamin nodded. The first move, like a heartbeat in the silence, was about to be made. Benjamin's hand hovered above the ivory pawn, fingers brushing its smooth surface. Every muscle in his body was still, every thought sharpening like a scalpel. The room was quiet, yet alive. Shadows danced across the walls from the flickering sconces, the faint scent of tea lingered, and hidden speakers whispered Chopin's Nocturne, the same piece Emma Caldwell had played on the night she vanished. The Black Knight on the board seemed to hum with memory. He moved the pawn forward, small, deliberate, unassuming. The sound it made on the polished board was soft, yet resonated through the hall like the first note of a symphony. Gray's eyes flicked up, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Predictable, but not without purpose," he said. His voice was calm, controlled, yet there was an edge, subtle as the brush of a blade. The first move set the tone. Banjamin knew that with every step, every gesture, he would be probing Gray's mind as much as the board. He had studied him from a distance, gleaning habits, micro-expressions, inflections in speech. Gray's reputation was formidable, he had defended billion-dollar estates, navigated political scandals, and remained untouchable. Yet tonight, Banjamin sensed the man's mask would slip under pressure. Gray leaned forward, fingers poised above a black pawn. "You're familiar with the Silent Quartet, I assume," he said, almost conversationally. 5 years, and the city still whispers about it. A brilliant young woman, a vanished pianist, a single black night, and not a soul held accountable. Banjamin's lips tightened imperceptibly. He had followed the case in news clips, piecing together what the police and tabloids reported. Emma Caldwell, 27, disappeared after her final solo recital at the old Quartet Hall. Her unfinished Chopin nocturne remained on the piano, the black night lay beside it, untouched, unexplained. The media had framed it as a mystery, the city called it tragedy. Banjamin had never touched the case, yet its details were etched into his mind. Gray's pawn slid forward. She discovered something, something inconvenient. Perhaps she overheard conversations, perhaps she found documents she shouldn't have seen. Regardless, she was silenced. And though the world moved on, some games never end. Banjamin nodded slowly, analyzing the placement of the pieces as if they mirrored the past. Pawns in a front line, knights guarding flanks, bishops poised to strike. Each figure a symbol, each move deliberate. And somewhere in this room, Gray's mind was laying out the story he thought Banjamin didn't know. The game had begun in earnest. Each move across the board echoed the dance of power, deception, and hidden truths. Banjamin's mind raced, not just with strategy but with the human element, the motivations, fears, and subtle compulsions that led someone to cover a crime, manipulate a scene, or remain silent for years. He recalled a detail from old news footage, the green tea cup on the windowsill, slightly chipped at the edge, a single key hidden in the folds of sheet music, a camera inexplicably turned off at the critical moment. Subtle signs, almost trivial, but enough for someone with his eyes to notice. Gray's next move was aggressive, a knight leaping forward, threatening Banjamin's pawn. It was bold, confident, almost arrogant. But Banjamin saw the underlying flaw, a small gap left unguarded, a predictable habit revealed. He countered with a bishop, sliding diagonally across the board, cutting off the knight's path. The room seemed to inhale. The game was no longer just chess, it was an intellectual duel, a war of observation and deduction. "Interesting," Gray murmured, eyes narrowing. "You notice everything, as I suspected. The city whispers, the pieces remember, and still, you play with patience. I like that." Banjamin leaned back slightly, letting his gaze drift across the hall. Every detail mattered, the polished floor, the scent of tea, the faint strains of Chopin. Each element was a clue, each movement an echo of the past. And in this room, in this game, he would uncover truths that the police could not, and perhaps, secrets even Gray hoped were buried forever. The pawn had moved first. The board was set. And the silent music of the quartet hall still lingered, waiting for its story to be told. Banjamin leaned closer to the board, his gray-blue eyes tracing the path of Gray's black knight as it leapt forward. Each move was precise, calculated, but Banjamin could see the subtleties beneath the surface, the slight hesitation, the overconfidence masked as certainty. A skilled player, yes, but not infallible. Every motion carried meaning beyond the chess game itself. Gray's lips curled in that controlled smirk of his. "The knight is a curious piece," he said, voice smooth. "Unpredictable, agile, capable of bypassing defenses. Yet it follows rules, just like life." He paused, letting the words sink. "Or death." His eyes flicked toward the chessboard, then toward Banjamin, sharp as a scalpel. Banjamin's mind replayed the fragments he had observed over the years, news segments about Emma Caldwell, photographs of the Black Knight left on the piano, whispers of something Emma had discovered at the quartet hall just before she vanished. The pieces on the board mirrored reality more than Gray realized. Pawns were witnesses, knights were enforcers, bishops hidden agendas, the queen a devastating truth yet untouchable. He moved his rook forward, blocking the knight's path while simultaneously threatening Gray's pawn chain. The sound of polished wood against polished wood echoed lightly in the hall, mingling with the faint strains of Chopin. Banjamin noted the subtle shiver along Gray's shoulder, a micro-expression, almost imperceptible. A crack in the man's polished armor. Gray's gaze sharpened. "You know, Mr. Hard, the city never forgets certain things. People vanish, headlines fade, but memory lingers. Those who remain, the guilty, the uninvolved, and the watchful, all play their parts." He shifted slightly, resting one hand on the edge of the table. "Emma Caldwell is one of those unforgettable cases. You heard of her, of course." Banjamin's response was calm, neutral, but his mind catalogued every syllable. "Everyone in the city remembers the story. The young pianist, the missing Black Knight, the unfinished nocturne. It's a puzzle that refuses to solve itself." Gray's eyes narrowed subtly. A puzzle indeed. Some say the police were incompetent, others that Emma stumbled upon secrets far too large for anyone to control. And yet, here we are, years later, still dealing with echoes. You could say that the pieces on this board represent more than mere strategy. They represent lives. Banjamin's hand hovered over a pawn, his thumb brushing the smooth wood. He considered the move carefully. The knight's advance was bold, threatening, but predictable when analyzed in context. He slid his pawn diagonally, a subtle threat, designed not only to challenge Gray's position but to draw a reaction. Gray's smirk tightened. "Ah, perceptive. But tell me, Mr. Hard, when a knight moves through the shadows, does it ever reveal what it carries? Or does it remain, always, a mystery?" Banjamin's gaze flicked to the Black Knight on the board, then to the one Gray had placed on the corner of the table, a mirror of Emma Caldwell's missing piece. His mind traced the scenario, a young woman, alone, observant, clever. She had discovered something that threatened the wrong people. The Black Knight had always symbolized her presence, her movement in a world that tried to ignore her. Another pawn moved. Another subtle pressure applied. Banjamin felt the thrill of discovery, the joy of aligning strategy with observation. Gray leaned forward suddenly, eyes narrowing. "You notice everything, don't you? The smallest detail, the scent of tea, the tilt of a chair, the placement of a pawn. Remarkable, and dangerous." Banjamin's lips tightened in a faint smile. Danger is often overrated. Precision is what matters. The clock ticked softly above the mantel. Every second was a heartbeat, every move a measure of tension. The night's dance continued, and with each motion, Banjamin pieced together the unseen story behind Emma Caldwell's disappearance. Every hesitation, every calculated risk, every subtle reaction of Gray's, these were the clues the city had ignored, the breadcrumbs no one else had noticed. The Black Knight had moved. And through its shadowed steps, Banjamin realized the game had only just begun. Banjamin's gaze flicked around the Royal Gambit Club as Gray contemplated his next move. The man's fingers hovered over a rook, heavy with intention, and Banjamin realized this was more than a game of chess, it was a map. Every piece's placement, every deliberate pause, seemed to trace corridors and secrets hidden in plain sight. While Gray's attention remained fixed on the board, Banjamin subtly scanned the room. The club was quiet, almost reverent, but the details whispered truths. A faint scratch in the corner molding, a slight misalignment in the floorboards near the bar, a shadow that didn't match the lighting. Nothing overt, nothing anyone else would notice. But Banjamin had learned to see the invisible, to interpret the ordinary as extraordinary. He stood, deliberately stretching, letting his movements appear casual. Gray's eyes flicked to him, narrow and calculating, yet Banjamin continued, circling the room, observing. His fingers brushed along the railing of the mezzanine staircase, tracing a subtle groove hidden beneath the varnish. A slight metallic glint caught his eye. It was a small hinge, cleverly concealed. He crouched briefly and examined it, finding a thin seam in the wall, almost imperceptible, yet a door nonetheless. A hidden corridor. Gray's voice broke the silence. "Ah, inspecting the scenery while we play? I suppose that is your way." Calm, but with a hint of caution. "The corridors here are old, intricate. Like the mind, they conceal much." Banjamin straightened, returning to the table with a faint smile. "Old structures always have secrets. It's only a matter of time before someone finds them." Gray moved his rook decisively, cutting off Banjamin's bishop. The tension on the board mirrored the tension in the room. Banjamin studied the rook's position, noting the parallels to the concealed corridor he had just discovered. He understood, Gray had arranged more than pieces, he had set a challenge, a puzzle layered both mentally and physically. Banjamin spoke softly, almost to himself. "The past leaves traces, even when people believe it is gone." Gray's eyes narrowed, intrigued. The hidden corridor had a faint scent, dust, polish, and something more subtle, green tea perhaps, lingering as though it had seeped from the walls decades ago. Banjamin's mind raced through the memory of Emma Caldwell. The vanished pianist. The solo recital. The black night left behind on the piano. The unplayed nocturne. And the city that had moved on, leaving her story incomplete. He knew then that the chessboard was only part of Gray's game. The room itself was a stage. Every wall, every fixture, even the placement of the tea-cup, was a signal, a map for those clever enough to decode it. And Banjamin, as always, was clever enough. Gray leaned back, studying Banjamin. "You understand the pieces, but do you understand the context? 5 years, Mr. Hard. People forget. Yet you do not. That is, rare." Banjamin's hand hovered over his knight. He could feel the story emerging through the motion of the game, knights representing Emma's unexpected movements, rooks guarding secrets, bishops observing from the shadows. And the hidden corridor. That was the unspoken truth, the secret path that Gray had hoped no one would notice. With a precise motion, Banjamin slid his knight forward, forcing Gray into a defensive stance. The shift was subtle but undeniable. Gray's eyes sharpened, his fingers flexed. Banjamin caught the micro-expression, noting the slight tension in the jaw. The game continued, but Banjamin's attention split between the chessboard and the room itself. Every movement revealed a pattern, a rhythm, a connection to the Silent Quartet case. And in the back of his mind, he understood the unspoken rules, the city's memory, the hidden corridors, the faint echoes of music and tea, all were part of the challenge Gray had constructed. Banjamin's lips curled into a faint smile. The first tangible clue, the hidden passage, was his. And he knew, with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen countless puzzles, that this discovery would bring him one step closer to the truth about Emma Caldwell and the Black Knight that had haunted the city for years. The rook had moved. The corridor had been found. And the game, like the city's secrets, was only just beginning. Banjamin returned to the table, his eyes flicking between the chessboard and the hidden corridor he had discovered. Gray had moved his bishop, sliding it diagonally with deliberate grace, positioning it to threaten Banjamin's pawn. It was an elegant, almost theatrical attack, one designed to test not only strategy but perception. Banjamin recognized the parallel. Just as the bishop could traverse diagonals, secrets often moved unseen, cutting across the straight paths of logic. He leaned slightly forward, resting his hands lightly on the edge of the table. "You've positioned your bishop," he said quietly, "but even the most elegant attack reveals weaknesses." Gray's eyes narrowed, a faint tightening at the corner betraying his attention to more than the game itself. Banjamin's gaze shifted subtly toward the mezzanine, toward the faint seam in the wall where the hidden corridor began. The alignment was no coincidence. Gray had intended the room to be part of the puzzle. And now, with the bishop in play, Banjamin understood that the man was testing not only intellect but awareness, forcing him to observe and analyze simultaneously. He considered his move carefully. The bishop's diagonal threatened a pawn that represented one of the many innocuous elements in Gray's intricate life. Yet Banjamin knew that pawns, though small, could be powerful in their potential. He slid his knight forward, cutting across the board with precision. The knight's movement mirrored his own observations, jumping from one clue to the next, linking the corridors, the chessboard, and the echoes of Emma Caldwell's disappearance. Gray's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flash of recognition, or perhaps concern. "Ah," he murmured, "you see the connections. Not just the pieces, but the implications behind them. Impressive, Mr. Hard." Banjamin allowed a faint nod but gave no words to his thoughts. He was cataloguing the room as he catalogued the game, noting subtle signs of human error, a slight scuff on the floor by the bar, a discolored section of the wall, the faint smell of tea that lingered in corners as if someone had been careful to leave just enough trace. Each observation was a piece of the puzzle, a part of the story Gray believed was hidden. Emma Caldwell, the pianist, the vanished figure whose black knight had become an emblem of mystery, had left no traces of her own, but in her absence, the room and the board spoke. Banjamin understood this. He moved his bishop, intercepting Gray's attack. The piece slid with smooth precision, threatening the black knight while also creating a pathway for the next sequence. Gray leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. There was respect in his posture now, subtle but unmistakable. He was acknowledging that his opponent was not merely reacting, but anticipating, interpreting, decoding. "You've studied the past," Gray said softly, voice carrying just enough tension to hint at unease. "You understand the stakes better than anyone. Emma Caldwell, her disappearance, it's not simply history. It's a pattern. A warning. And you, somehow, have discerned it." Banjamin said nothing. His eyes tracked the chessboard, the room, the hidden corridor, the faint clues Gray had left for someone clever enough to notice. Every piece had a purpose, every movement had intent. And just like the city, the game was layered, multidimensional, demanding patience, insight, and precision. The bishop had struck. The pattern revealed itself more clearly, and Banjamin's mind worked tirelessly, connecting the invisible threads, Emma's unfinished nocturne, the green tea cup, the black knight, Gray's subtle manipulations. Each element pointed to a single truth: the man sitting across from him was more involved than he would admit, and the city's memory, long dormant, was about to awaken. Banjamin's hand hovered over his queen. He felt the quiet thrill of anticipation, the knowledge that one bold move could shift the balance of power entirely. The chessboard mirrored reality, threats, deception, hidden paths, and opportunities. And in that convergence, he understood that the first real revelation of Gray's involvement was at hand. The bishop had attacked. Banjamin had answered. And now, the next move could decide not just the game, but the unveiling of a long-buried secret. The game had escalated beyond the elegant dance of pawns and knights. Banjamin's queen now dominated the center of the board, poised to strike, just as his mind dominated the room, piecing together fragments Gray had attempted to bury. Every movement of the chess pieces mirrored the larger pattern: Emma Caldwell's disappearance, the corruption at Quartet Hall, and the subtle manipulations of the man sitting across from him. Gray's hand hovered over his queen, deliberate and controlled. He had always maintained the image of composure, but Banjamin noted the tension in the fingers, the slight twitch in the jaw, the quickened blink. Even a man of such poise could not entirely mask the cracks under the pressure of someone who saw every detail, remembered every fact, and could anticipate the implications of every move. "You're bold," Gray said softly, voice low enough that only Banjamin could hear. "You move the queen as though nothing else matters. Yet every piece is connected. Emma Caldwell, you remember her, yes?" His gaze flicked momentarily to the corner where the black knight rested, a symbol, a memory, a message. Benjamin's grey-blue eyes remained steady. Everyone remembers, he said. Her music, the Black Night, the unfinished nocturne. The city never forgot, even if the authorities preferred to look away. Gray leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Indeed. But memory is only the beginning. Understanding is another matter. She stumbled upon truths that no one wanted exposed. Documents, conversations, evidence of corruption at the Quartet Hall reconstruction. She wasn't meant to know, and certainly not meant to act. And yet, she played her part, as she always did, precisely, skillfully, like a queen moving across a chessboard. Too clever for her own protection. Benjamin's mind raced. The pieces on the board reflected reality. Pawns were witnesses, knights were enforcers, rooks were hidden guardians, bishops moved unseen, and the queen, Emma, was the force that had disrupted a carefully constructed facade. Gray had tried to obscure his involvement, but the subtle traces remained. He moved his queen, cutting diagonally across the board in a decisive attack. Gray's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, the mask slipped entirely. He glanced toward the mezzanine, the hidden corridor, the corner where the green teacup had been placed. It was all connected, and Benjamin saw it clearly. You've discovered more than the board shows, Gray admitted, his tone clipped but respectful. Most would be satisfied with the game itself, blind to the context. But you understand the crossfire. You see how every move in chess mirrors every decision in life. Benjamin's response was quiet but firm. The crossfire exists only because someone chose to hide the truth. And when you hide, the patterns don't disappear, they wait to be discovered. The queen's attack threatened Gray's knight, the central piece that symbolized his influence and control. Benjamin saw the panic beneath the practiced composure. Gray's next move was defensive, almost too cautious. The subtle hesitation betrayed him. He had underestimated Benjamin's capacity to link the chessboard to reality, to connect hidden corridors, unspoken motives, and the faint, lingering traces of Emma Caldwell. You move as if predicting everything, Gray said, leaning forward, voice sharper now. How? Benjamin's gaze didn't waver. Observation. Analysis. Memory. Skills you've underestimated. Skills that reveal the truth hidden behind your carefully constructed facade. The clock above the mantel ticked steadily. Each second pressed against Gray like the weight of long-forgotten evidence. The queen on Benjamin's side now dominated the board entirely, a symbol of clarity cutting through years of deception. The Black Knight, Gray's strongest piece, was trapped. Benjamin's lips curved into a faint smile. For the first time, he saw the solution emerging not just in the game but in reality. Gray's involvement in Emma Caldwell's disappearance, subtle yet undeniable, had been exposed. The hidden corridors, the misplaced objects, the lingering tea, each was a breadcrumb leading to the truth. The crossfire had begun. Gray had no choice but to react, to reveal himself fully. And when he did, Benjamin knew he would finally connect the last piece, the one that would complete his understanding of the Silent Quartet and prepare him for the final move that would bring closure to a mystery the city had long whispered about. The queen had struck. The game had shifted. And Benjamin, always patient, was ready to claim the truths that lay hidden beneath the shadows of chess, music, and human deceit. Benjamin's eyes never left the board. Every move Gray made was deliberate, but beneath the veneer of control, cracks were appearing. The king, Gray himself in this metaphorical game, was now exposed. The Black Knight, his strongest defender, had been cornered by Benjamin's queen and bishop, and the subtle defenses of pawns and rooks offered little protection. "You've cornered me," Gray said, voice calm but edged with tension. "I admit it. You see patterns most ignore, connections most fail to notice. But even so, the king is not so easily captured." Benjamin allowed a faint smile, letting his hand hover over his queen. He knew the move that would force Gray into a position he could no longer conceal. The room seemed to pulse with anticipation, the hidden corridor, the lingering scent of tea, the faint strains of Chopin's Nocturne, all converged in a perfect alignment of past and present. Power isn't just in defense, Banjamin said, his voice steady, almost conversational. It's in the truths you attempt to hide. The evidence, the omissions, the subtle manipulations of people and events. Emma Caldwell, the Black Knight, the city remembers, and so do I. Gray's fingers tightened slightly on his king piece, a tiny imperceptible movement that betrayed the anxiety he could not speak aloud. You know too much, he murmured, a shadow of fear creeping into his measured tone. Banjamin leaned forward slightly, gaze piercing. I know enough. Enough to see the connections you hoped would remain invisible. The hidden corridors, the green tea, the chessboard itself, it's all a reflection of your involvement. You've moved people like pieces for years, Gray. But every pattern has a flaw, every strategy a weak point. And now, the king is exposed. Gray shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You think the police will act? He asked, voice low. After 5 years, evidence decays, memories fade. You rely on what? Observation, deduction, imagination. Banjamin's eyes flicked to the clock above the mantel, it's ticking a steady metronome in the tension-filled room. I rely on precision, he said. On noticing what others overlook. The city may have forgotten, but the clues remain. And I've connected them all. Even the smallest detail, like the Black Knight, has meaning. You underestimated the value of what seems trivial. He slid his queen decisively, a move that forced Gray's king into a corner of the board, leaving him no defensive options. The subtlety of the maneuver mirrored the pattern Banjamin had traced through the hidden corridor, the placement of objects in the room, and the lingering traces of Emma Caldwell's last moments. Gray's gaze hardened, a flicker of desperation behind his composed exterior. You've anticipated everything, he said, almost in disbelief. Every pawn, every knight, every bishop. How? Banjamin's voice remained calm, controlled. Observation. Memory. And a commitment to uncovering the truth. You thought the game was only on the board, but it has always been real. People, events, movements, they are all pieces. And you, Mr. Gray, have been playing dangerously. The final pawn moved, clearing the last path. Banjamin's queen now threatened the king with inevitable capture. Gray's defenses crumbled, not with brute force but with the weight of exposure. Every micro-expression, every subtle sign Banjamin had observed, every detail from the past 5 years, the Black Knight, the tea, the hidden corridor, had led to this moment. Banjamin's gray-blue eyes met Gray's, unyielding, calm. It's over. The king cannot escape. Gray's composure faltered completely for the first time. He realized the inevitable, the patterns, the evidence, and Banjamin's insight had cornered him. The metaphorical check was now absolute, and the city's long-forgotten truth was ready to be revealed. Banjamin leaned back slightly, letting the silence fill the room. The game had reached its climax. The king was under threat, exposed, and powerless. Emma Caldwell's story, the Black Knight, the hidden corridors, all were converging, and Banjamin had forced the culmination. The clock ticked relentlessly. The final move, and the truth would finally be undeniable. Banjamin's hand hovered over the queen. The room was silent except for the faint tick of the clock and the distant hum of the city beyond the thick glass walls. Every detail he had observed, the hidden corridor, the green tea scent, the placement of objects, Gray's micro-expressions, had led to this precise moment. The game was no longer just chess. It was the unraveling of years of deceit, manipulation, and the silent suffering of a vanished life. He slid the queen forward. The move was subtle, precise, inevitable. Gray's king was cornered. There was nowhere to retreat, no pawn to shield him, no knight to protect. Checkmate. Banjamin's gray-blue eyes met Gray's, unwavering, unyielding. Gray exhaled sharply, the controlled mask finally slipping. Impossible, he muttered, leaning back. How? Benjamin's voice was calm, almost conversational, but beneath it lay the weight of every deduction, every observation, every truth he had pieced together. Observation. Patience. Memory. The game has been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Every move you made, every subtle manipulation, every attempt to erase Emma Caldwell's trail, it left clues. And I followed them all. Gray's eyes darted to the Black Knight resting in the corner, a silent emblem of Emma, of the unresolved past. He understood, finally, that Benjamin had not only mastered the board but had seen the connections he had tried so hard to conceal. Benjamin continued, voice steady. Emma Caldwell was more than a pawn in your schemes. She discovered what you thought no one would ever find. Documents, conversations, evidence linking you to corruption at the Quartet Hall reconstruction. She was silenced, but the traces remained. You underestimated the power of precision, of noticing what others overlook. Gray's fingers twitched on the table. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. The weight of exposure pressed upon him like the inexorable force of gravity. Benjamin knew the man's reputation would not withstand scrutiny now. The city, the authorities, and history itself would no longer allow the truth to be hidden. Benjamin leaned back slightly, letting the tension linger a moment longer. Then, with deliberate calm, he reached for the Black Knight on the board. He held it in his hand, letting its weight settle into his palm. A symbol, a clue, a memory of Emma Caldwell and the Silent Quartet. He placed it carefully in his coat pocket. A new addition to his collection, a reminder of the case he had never officially worked, but had now unraveled completely. Every detail mattered, the pawn moves, the hidden corridors, the subtle expressions, the chessboard that mirrored reality. And now, the city's whispered mystery had a witness, and a collector of truth. Gray finally spoke, voice low, almost a hiss. You've seen everything. Benjamin nodded. Everything. And now it's over. He stood, straightening his coat. The game ends, but the consequences continue. Emma Caldwell's story is no longer silent, and the Black Knight will not be forgotten. The room seemed to exhale. The hidden corridors, the chessboard, the lingering scent of tea, and the faint strains of Chopin all aligned in quiet resonance. Benjamin had completed the puzzle, forcing Gray into exposure and reclaiming the narrative of a vanished life. He turned toward the door, glancing one last time at the board. Each piece still carried meaning, but the Black Knight, the symbol of persistence, of observation, of truth, was now his. He had won not just the game, but the revelation, the long-hidden truth of the Silent Quartet. The clock ticked steadily as Benjamin walked into the night. Outside, Manhattan's neon lights shimmered in puddles of rain, indifferent yet aware. The city had witnessed another checkmate, subtle yet absolute, and Benjamin Hart had added another story, and another piece, to his collection. The city had returned to its usual rhythm, distant horns, flickering neon, and the muffled steps of night wanderers. Benjamin walked through the rain-slicked streets, his coat pulled tightly around him, the Black Knight secure in his pocket. The game was over, but its echoes lingered, weaving through every memory, every subtle detail he had catalogued. Back in his loft, the city skyline sprawled beneath him, shimmering reflections in the Hudson like fragments of forgotten truths. Benjamin placed the Black Knight on the shelf alongside the others he had collected over the years, small objects, tokens of cases solved, mysteries unraveled, and human lives briefly intersected by his insight. Each piece told a story. Each artifact was a reminder of observation, deduction, and patience. He studied the night, running a finger over its polished edges. Emma Caldwell's story, once silenced, now had a symbol. The hidden corridors, the chessboard, the subtle traces Gray had left behind, all were part of this emblem, captured in miniature yet heavy with meaning. Benjamin smiled faintly. It was not just a piece of wood. It was closure. Justice. A testament to the truth surviving despite deceit. The phone on his desk buzzed briefly, a quiet reminder that the world outside still existed. Messages from colleagues, tips on other cases, mundane chatter. Banjamin ignored it for now. His mind traced the chain of events once more: the invitation, the Black Knight, the Royal Gambit Club, Gray's subtle reveals, the hidden corridor, and the final checkmate. Every detail had aligned, every observation had mattered, and now the story could be told. He poured himself a cup of green tea, inhaling its grassy aroma. The music played softly from the stereo, Chopin's Nocturne, the same melody that had haunted the quartet hall and lingered in the city's memory. Banjamin sat at the piano, letting his fingers trace the keys gently. Music, chess, and observation, they all shared the same rhythm: patience, calculation, and attention to detail. The Black Knight rested on the shelf, a quiet sentinel. Banjamin considered its weight, not just physical, but symbolic. It marked a case he had never officially worked, a story the city had long forgotten, and yet it had found him, and he had found the truth. Gray would face consequences, both legal and social, as the network of corruption surrounding the quartet hall was finally exposed. And Emma Caldwell's disappearance, though tragic, would no longer remain a mystery. Banjamin's eyes lingered on the night. The collection had grown, each piece a memory, a lesson, a fragment of human complexity. This one was special, not for its rarity, but for the story it carried, for the subtle challenge it represented, and for the satisfaction of uncovering what others had overlooked. He placed it carefully next to a small brass key from another case, a cracked watch from a different investigation, a faded photograph from a long-ago disappearance. Each item told a tale of patience, perception, and resolve. The Black Knight was now part of that silent chorus, a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply hidden, could always be uncovered. Banjamin poured another cup of tea, letting the warmth seep into his hands. Outside, the city's lights flickered like distant stars, indifferent to the minutiae of human affairs, yet alive with the stories they contained. He leaned back in his chair, fingers resting lightly on the piano, and for the first time that night, allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The case of the Silent Quartet was no longer just a memory in news archives, it was a story completed, a puzzle solved, and a night claimed. Banjamin Hard, as always, had observed, deduced, and prevailed. The chessboard was cleared, the king under threat neutralized, and the Black Knight, the trophy of insight, patience, and resolution, had found its rightful place among the collection. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with life, unaware of the quiet victory inside the loft. Banjamin sipped his tea, eyes on the city, mind already turning to the next case, the next puzzle. But for now, the night rested. And in its stillness, Banjamin found a rare, subtle satisfaction: justice, observation, and truth, preserved in miniature form, forever part of his collection. The city would continue, mysteries would arise, and games would be played, but for tonight, the trophy was his.